just let it happen, and we'll clip anything that's not good, and you know how this technology is. Delete it.
Airbrush.
Airbrush. We'll do a little Photoshop.
Right.
And
that sounds good.
so this is exciting to have you here with us today, Brad. Dr. Brad
Thanks.
Burke. It's wonderful. You are a physician. Would you
Right.
tell us what you're doing now?
I specialize in physical medicine rehabilitation. So I treat patients who've had strokes, spinal cord injuries, head trauma, patients with back and knee pain, shoulder pain, and I act as a team leader in treating these patients with occupational, physio, and speech therapists.
That's wonderful. I remember the first time we met. It was at a Right Canada conference a few years ago, and you were being interviewed by Les Stobie, publishing agent, and you said at that time that there was a reason for the great success that you've had as a publisher of 12 books. Well, you have how many published?
Well, 4 were published, and I wrote probably a total of 12 altogether. There's a lot still sitting on my computer.
Yes, and I've read a couple of those that aren't published yet, and your work is fantastic. A lot of the medicine comes through in your books. And now, when I heard you interviewed, there was one specific thing that really stood out in my mind, and one of the reasons that I wanted to share with you today. You said that there was a reason why you felt your success was so great as a young man. And what did you tell me?
I owe a lot to my parents, my mom and dad, who got me memorizing Bible verses very young. I think I was probably only 3 years old when they were making up books for me with Bible verses, and they had pictures of the earth, and for example, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So they had these pictures for me, and so even before I could read, they were trying to teach me Bible verses.
Wow.
And from there, I kept memorizing more. They kept giving me more challenges and projects, and so I went from memorizing some of those verses that are a little bit easier for toddlers to memorize, to memorizing books like the Book of James and 1 John, and later Proverbs and Ecclesiastes.
Wow. Now, you also told me that during your university, getting through med school, that memorizing scripture took a very important part. Tell us about that.
Yes, I started really getting back into, I had done a lot of years of memorization and meditation through high school and then into university.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until probably my end of my medical school and into my residency when I really started to pick it back up again and really started going and memorizing a lot more verses, because I realized just how much it had helped me in the younger years. And I unfortunately let myself get sidelined by my studies. And one day I said to myself, what am I doing? There's all these benefits to memorization and meditation on Scripture. I should get back into doing just as much as I was. So I picked it back up in those years of university, and when I was down in California studying and working there in the hospital, working some crazy hours, I was still able to get back into memorization, and
That's great.
I loved it, and it's helped me in so many ways.
So you mentioned the benefits. Just tell us a couple of the benefits.
Well, first of all, gaining a better understanding of who God is. Because when we memorize and meditate on Scripture, we just come away with a different appreciation of who God is, because we're getting right into the verses and we're applying it to ourselves, and we're asking the questions, well, why would God do this, or why might He act in that way? And when you spend a lot of time meditating on these verses, God will often speak to you back and say, well, this is who I am, this is the way I act, and so it's given me a much greater appreciation for who God is and how He acts in my life. And He's also helped convict me of the sin in my life too, because when you're reading through these verses and memorizing and meditating on them, you can't help but be convicted of sins, not just the open sins that people might see, but also the sins of the heart, and help me understand better how much these sins pain God. And
What part has memorized scripture played in your books? One that I'm thinking of right now is, why does God allow suffering?
Right.
What part has it played in that?
That's probably one of the hardest questions for Christians to answer, is how could a good God allow His children to suffer? And for those questions, I went right to Scripture and tried to come up with some answers for why things are like they are. And with preparing for my books and researching and doing Bible studies and meditating on Scripture, I really found it was that meditation throughout my years, beginning as a toddler, right up in medical school and further on. It really helped me be able to come up with some answers. I don't have all the answers. God doesn't give us all the answers in the Bible, but there are definitely answers there. And if we dig hard enough, He will show us, reveal to us more about who He is and how He acts.
So what would be the benefit, though, of having it in your heart as opposed to just reading and digging it?
Well, if it's in your heart, again, it's something you can carry with you all day. So you can keep going over it in your mind, and you're constantly thinking about it. And even when you're doing, just monotonous activities like raking the leaves or waiting in line or you're stuck in traffic, those verses are constantly going through your mind, and all of a sudden something will click, and it's like, oh, so that's the reason why God works that way. And it can be kind of churning through your mind, and it's like you're not at rest until you get an answer, and then it comes to you, and you say, "Wow, isn't God great?"
That's great. Since we first met, you have a beautiful wife, Erin, and now a beautiful daughter. What's her name?
Karis.
Karis.
Karis with a K.
Beautiful. She's beautiful. Now, what are you going to do as Karis grows in relationship to memorizing Scripture?
Right. Well, she's 13 months old right now, so she's just a little young, and she's also a very hyperactive person, so this is going to be a challenge for me. But I already have a memorization book. It's a child's memorization book with the different letters, A, B, C, and for each letter there's a certain verse that goes along with it. So I already got the book, and I'll probably get some stickers or some pictures to put in there, and that's my plan. And like I said, a little bit too young yet, but it won't be long.
But you've got it in your heart that you want to pass this on.
Oh, yeah.
As your parents passed it to you, then you are following through on Deuteronomy 6 and 7. Bind it on your heart, teach it to your children, whether you're walking, whether you're sitting. That is great. There was one other thing that really impressed me when we talked. I think it was on the phone last summer, and you said at one point your mother found a way to stimulate you to memorizing Scripture. Tell us about that. I love that.
That's almost embarrassing in a way, because they in the very beginning when I was young, they needed some way to motivate me. So they said, well, we'll pay you $1.50 for every verse that you memorize. But here's the rules. You have to wait until you've memorized a lot of verses before you get the money and you're allowed to spend it. So I had to save it. I couldn't memorize a verse, get $1.50, go to the store, get some bubble gum, come back again. That type of thing. So I had to memorize large chunks of Scripture, and then I was paid. But as the years went on, I started memorizing Scripture without getting paid, because I realized the benefits to it, obviously, and then I realized that memorization meditation holds a lot more than earthly riches. There's a lot of spiritual riches and rewards that money just doesn't compare to.
So you probably can't answer me right now, but I'm just wondering if one day you're going to pay Karis for memorizing Scripture. Now, you don't have to answer us because you probably don't even know.
I know. If we look at inflation, that might be up to $2.50 or $3.
That's right.
I'm not sure I can afford that, especially if she memorizes a lot. But yeah, we'll come up with some way to maybe motivate her in the beginning.
But you do know it's important.
Oh, yes.
You know it's important. And it's, I don't know if you're discovering this a little bit, but I think that there is a little bit of a resurgence and desire to memorize Scripture again as the ancient spiritual discipline that it is. Do you think that is?
I think there is. This pastor and author has been selling these books for children, and they're really, really good. I mean, again, they're laid out with letters and Bible verses, and so it is seem to be more popular, and more families and parents are getting involved in teaching their kids how to memorize Scripture, and it even helps with their schoolwork later on. I remember growing up, all of the kids in my classes who did a lot of memorization, they were the ones who were also doing well in school, because again, memorization is a lot that we do in school. So you get the children used to it in the beginning, then when they go to school, it's easier for them. And
now, sometimes people will say, "Oh, I can't remember," or "I'm too old." What would you say to someone that had those questions?
Yeah, we all have different abilities as far as our memory goes. I would probably say mine's average. I know there's individuals who memorize complete book after book, and then go back. You just tell them a verse, and they can quote it right off. And I have trouble doing that type of thing. There are others who they can memorize a verse, and they have to keep going over and over and over it again for weeks for it to get to stick. Again, we all have different abilities, and for those that have difficulty memorizing, I would say just start, because it will get easier. And there's different techniques you can do. You can write the Bible verse, you can put it on your fridge, you can put it on your mirror, you can put it on your dashboard of your car, so that when you're sitting in traffic, not driving of course,
no.
but when you're sitting in traffic and you're stopped and not going anywhere, I mean, you can be glancing down looking at the Bible verse, and so there's different things.
Can anyone memorize a certain amount?
I think pretty much. I don't see why not. I mean, children, right? They can memorize. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and they can do that when they're 3. So
that's right. And I think, if I recall correctly, that you told me that even your stroke victims can memorize the names of nurses and
yes.
or remember the names of nurses. So every one of us has a bit of a memory bank there.
Right.
Unless we're incapacitated.
Right. It's there, and the good thing is too, if someone becomes disabled later on in their lifetime, often it's those memories at the very beginning that stick. The short-term memory, what you take in one day and try to remember the next, that might go. But those long-term memories, if someone's learned a song or learned a Bible verse, those are what really stick in someone's mind, and those often come back later.
And just when we need them too.
Right.
Isn't that true, that God just brings to mind everything that we need because He provides for us, right?
Right.
Brad, it has been Dr. Brad Burke.
Right.
It's so wonderful for you to take the time to be here and to encourage all of the people that are going to be watching how important memorizing is and how it's impacted your life, and it's going to then affect the life of your children. I thank you so much for doing this. It's just a real honor and a privilege to have you here at this conference, and then for you to take the time. Pray that you have a fabulous cruise.
Thank you.
You're going on a cruise tomorrow,
yes.
And don't eat too much.
I'll try not. With my wife on board, I don't think it will be.
If Erin is there, she's going to make
Yeah.
sure that you stay on track, right?
Yeah,
literally.
That's right. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you
All right.
so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Megan.